Hi, my name is Leah Day, and welcome to this video for the Free Motion Quilting Project. In this video, I'd like to explain exactly how I designed the background for this version of Express Your Love. Designing is one of those things that I find absolutely thrilling, and I love to share it, I love to teach it, and I think it's one of those things about quilting that can be kind of mysterious. You know, how does someone do that? A lot of times we buy patterns and we make straight from the pattern. That's great, that's perfectly fine. But what if there's something in your mind and you're kind of thinking, I wonder what would happen if I did this or I did that. And I really want to encourage you to follow those impulses. And I hope that this video helps to inspire you that if there's been a quilt in the back of your mind that you've been wanting to make, to start taking the steps to design it and make it. It's a little scary, but it's pushing yourself past that comfort zone, and it's so important for loving your craft. So let me talk first about this background. This is, of course, log cabin background with this star in the center, and the star is really what started the whole thing. I pieced this at Sew South this spring. It's a paper piecing project that I learned from Jennifer Mathis. And the thing about paper piecing is I have a craving to do that about once a year. And I got my fill at Sew South. I loved it. It was fun. But I knew I didn't want to piece more than this. I was happy with just this. And so when I looked at it, well, I remembered that I had a lot of this dark blue dot batik fabric. I had tons of it, just tons and tons of scraps all over the place. And so I thought, well, that would be a kind of a cool background to set for Express Your Love and make the star and replace the earth with the star. And so from that kind of little nudge, I started thinking about it and kind of let the idea play out. I didn't immediately go home and start piecing this. I really think it's important to, when you get an idea, let your brain chew on it for a little while, sketch on it a little while, think about it, but don't rush it. Don't feel like you have to do something immediately about it. It's sometimes a process of, and it's sometimes time consuming just simply to figure out what you want to do. And it was only last week that I realized, hey, I really crave log cabin blocks. I really want to put this in a background with log cabin. So sometimes it takes time to get that inspiration down. So the center star was here, and it's 6 inches. And that's really lucky because the earth circle on the quilt happens to be 6 inches. And so here's what I did. I created this graph of the quilt, and I made 6 little blocks represent 6 inches. So each block represents 1 inch of this quilt. And so that became my star. And so then I could start planning out what goes around it. Well, what I wanted to go around it was this start to a log cabin. So this is actually a 12-inch block right here. And I turned that 6-inch star into a 12-inch block by piecing 8 3-inch log cabin blocks. And I pieced them so that the lighter blue was the dominant color. All those mixtures of blue were the dominant color. And if you're curious about what I mean by dominant in a log cabin, definitely look at the tutorial, the lesson on how to piece a log cabin block, and I'll kind of explain my terminology with that video. So once those 8 were pieced around this block, that became 12 inches. And then it became something I could work with. Because at that point, then I knew, well, 2 6-inch log cabins could go above it and below it into both sides, and to create that diamond effect. I love the diamond. There's a pattern that I created called the rainbow quilt that is actually a larger size log cabin that uses that diamond and radiates out with, the colors of the rainbow: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, and purple. So this is really kind of hearkening back to that quilt pattern I made several years ago. So once I pieced kind of the central section, then I was like, okay, I need to do some more planning and see how many blocks I need to put together. So I went back to my graph and I continued to build it up. And at that point, I really needed to know, okay, well, how is this in relation to Express Your Love herself? And it's really unique that you can take, I basically took my little sketch. This is my little sketch. And it's pretty terrible because I can really quilt much better than I can draw, and that's fine. But once I knew that this is 6 inches and my pieced star was 6 inches, well then that means these two things are on the same scale. They're being drawn on the same scale. And so I can pretty much lay her over my graph and say, okay, well, the original is this size, but I need to expand it. So that way this fits within a multiple of 6 or a multiple of 12. And so that's what I did. I've expanded this quilt so it's now 36 by 48 inches. It's going to be a lot bigger, but that's okay. I also found a nice little way of getting out from piecing all of these blocks. Over here in this section, this is going to be covered up with a goddess. Her face, her hair, her breath, all of that is going to really build up and cover so much of this. When I lay the goddess over this section, you can see just how much is covered. But really her hair and her body is covering up this whole section, so I don't need to piece and make all those extra log cabins if they're just going to be covered up. So that's 14 blocks that I did not piece. I simply cut out some scrap fabric, this dark blue print, and that's going to be just simply covered up whenever it comes time to add that layer in, but I needed something. I wanted this to be one solid piece. I want it to be one solid background on which everything else will be built up. So understand that graph paper and sketching and planning is essential to this process. You really don't know what you're doing until you sit down with a paper and pencil and just play. And you know what? If you mess up, there's another piece of graph paper. Or there's an eraser. Erase it, fix your mistake, go back to it. But don't be afraid of just trying to sketch things out. And you'll notice too, these diagonal lines, I'm kind of taking into account like the dominance and recessive quality of the log cabin blocks themselves. So here I knew that this is going to be a slightly smaller diamond and this was going to be slightly larger. My goal was to make the dark blue, the polka dotted dark blue, to be more dominant on the surface of this quilt, and it worked out great. You know, you have to always start with an idea or a nudge and really a mental picture of what you're wanting, and then the entire process after that is to simply take the steps to get you as close as possible to whatever you started with. And I can't promise that it's always going to be perfect. Sometimes I'll start with an idea in my head and I'll end up 180 degrees away from it, and that's fine. That's sometimes the process of where this takes you. When I originally thought of putting that star in the background, I was thinking it was going to be solid, you know, dark polka dotted blue. I absolutely didn't immediately think of the log cabins. So understand it's a process, but it's a lot of fun to just play with. And I am going to post details on exactly how many 6-inch log cabins, convent blocks that you need in order to piece this, how many of your blank blocks, and post all of that on the Free Motion Quilting Project, freemotionproject.com. So if you're wanting to make this identical quilt to mine, that's perfectly fine. Go to the Free Motion Quilting Project and check out the specs, because, you know, piecing something like this, it is going to be a little bit of effort. It took me about 2 days to get the entire background pieced, but in the end, it's going to be an awesome quilt, and I can't wait to get started on the next step. So my name is Leah Day, and this has been a video for the Free Motion Quilting Project. Find more fun videos on making this quilt at freemotionproject.com. Until next time, let's go quilt.